with James. But just before he died, he looked me in the eye and said, "Lisa, I wish it had been Emily who pulled me out of that snow all those years ago instead of you. In my next life, I want Emily. I want to hold her hand and grow old with her." "Fine then. Go ahead and die." James passed away with his eyes wide open, practically choked to death from anger. Our children all blamed me for crushing his pride, for making him leave this world filled with regret. But I didn't stay silent. I fired back at each of them, one by one, right there in the morning hall. "Michael," I said to the eldest, "when you got married and insisted on buying a house, do you know why we suddenly had no money? Because your father secretly sent it all back to his hometown to move the grave of his precious Emily." "Jessica," I turned to our second child, "you wanted your father's job, right? But do you know why you didn't get it? Because he gave it to Emily's nephew instead. Some distant relative of hers meant more to him than his own daughter." "Rachel," I faced our youngest, "do you know why your father was so insistent on marrying you off to that useless guy Brian, the son of the Goo family? Because he was Emily's oldest nephew." Then I took James's diaries, every last page, and scattered them across the funeral hall. Sheets of paper fluttered through the air like falling leaves, white pages waving like sails. The kids were dumbfounded. They didn't believe it until they bent down to read it themselves. Each and every one of our children. James had used them all to mourn a woman who died long ago. I had saved his life, yet he tricked me into slaving away for him, being a workhorse for an entire lifetime. I gave him my youth, my strength, my devotion. He gave all of himself to a ghost from the past. The heartbreak was too much. I collapsed on the spot, and I never woke up again. Or so I thought. When I opened my eyes, I was back. Back to the winter when I was 19, in the village hall of Clearwater, deep in the northern mountains. "Hey," said Emily, lying comfortably in the straw at the back of the mule cart, "if I say I like this hair tie you bought, will you give it to me?" Holding the reins, I replied coldly, "I bought it. Just because you like it, I have to give it to you?" "Isn't that how it's always been?" she answered without missing a beat. "You're tall, dark, and plain, a big country bumpkin. Even if you wear it, it won't look as good as it does on me. Why shouldn't you give it to me? Your dad's a coward who can't even fart when hit with a stick, and he just loves sucking up to my dad." She laughed out loud as she finished. That's when I saw James, half buried in snow, gripping the reins, whipping the mule into a frenzied run down the path. He looked like he was on the verge of collapse. "Well, why don't I just hand over James to you too?" I said, "the man who repaid kindness with betrayal." Emily jumped down from the cart and in the next second slipped in the snow and fell, landing right next to James, who was curled up and freezing. "Ah, help! There's a dead body," she screamed. "You stay here, I'm going back to the village to get help." My loud voice echoed across the white expanse. The sharp wind cut into my lungs like blades. It was freezing. In my past life, I'd lived most of it in the south. It had been a long time since I'd experienced this kind of bitter northern cold. The villagers soon arrived and pulled both James and Emily out of the snow. Emily turned to me and screamed, "Lisa, are you crazy? You left me lying there next to a corpse?" She stomped her feet and threw a tantrum in front of everyone. But the village head's wife acted like she didn't see anything. And the village head himself was more concerned about the condition of the relative who had just been rescued. To everyone there, this was all just another day. Why? Because Emily's father was the village chief, and she was the village belle. Her whole life, Emily held her head high. If I flattered her, she was pleased. If I didn't, I was the problem. The barefoot doctor came out of the house and made a gesture to the village chief. It meant James was still alive. Emily survived too, and she wasn't crippled. The village chief scolded her lightly. "That's an educated youth sent from the city. Show some respect." Emily was the village chief's youngest daughter, raised like a precious gem. Even if she had no empathy, her father never once rebuked her. I saw the thread of fate starting to entangle James and Emily. I didn't bother saying anything. I just turned around and walked home. In my past life, today was supposed to be the day Emily and I went to the town for some excitement. On the way back, she spotted someone buried in the snow and muttered that it was bad luck to see a frozen corpse. I was the one who ignored her, insisted on going forward, and ended up saving James's life. Afterward, James recovered in our home. Outwardly, he acted grateful to me. But secretly, he was already falling for Emily, who dropped by often. I used to think James kept coming back to the village for me, but his diary revealed the truth. He was only hoping to run into Emily. That same October, after 10 years of suspension, the national college entrance exams were suddenly reinstated. James took them more seriously than anything else in his life. I was heartbroken too. I helped James gather study materials from all over, patched up warm clothes for him by hand, and sought out anyone who might have news about the reinstated college entrance exam. Thanks to all my efforts, James was able to walk into the exam hall smoothly that year. He accepted all my care and support without complaint. Yet in his diary, he secretly vowed that once he got into college, he'd go to the village chief's house and formally propose to Emily. And sure enough, James passed. He became one of the few outstanding candidates admitted to university, something rare and prestigious. But the village chief's family had already arranged for Emily to marry someone from the county. Everyone at the farm knew how much I had helped James. Under the pressure of social expectations, he had no choice but to marry me. After the wedding, he went off to college while I stayed behind in the village, waiting for him. Later, when he was assigned a job in the city, I left my hometown, my family, and everything I knew to go with him and take care of him. When he offended his superiors, I was the one who helped smooth things over. And even when he eventually resigned from his government job to head south and start a new business thousands of miles away, I still emptied our savings to support him. Told him not to worry, that I had his back. Through decades of storms and struggles, I stood behind him. And not once did I suspect that James's heart belonged to someone else. But in every moment of personal triumph, he'd write things like, "If only Emily hadn't died so young, if only she were the one by my side, how happy I would have been." He spent his whole life mourning Emily. And I was just the backup plan, a woman he chose out of obligation and practicality. "Lisa, aren't you cold? Come inside." It was my younger brother David, his teenage frame blocking the back curtain as he waved me in. He had already passed in my past life, but now he looked just like I remembered. The cold wind turned the tears in my eyes into tiny ice crystals. It was freezing, and yet I felt warm. I saw my long-lost parents again. I rushed up and hugged them both with all my heart. My mom shoved me to the side and my dad grumbled, "Girl, don't be so dramatic. It's spooky." Once I stepped inside, I grabbed a small mirror and stared at my face. Pale, rough skin, a nose tip red from the cold, thick brows and big eyes set in a face that always looked a little too stern. I had really become young again. David rolled his eyes and teased, "What are you so smug about?" I asked absent-mindedly. "David, between me and Emily, she's prettier, right?" He closed his eyes and covered his head. "Of course Emily's prettier. Doesn't everyone in the village say so?" Emily might have been bossy and spoiled, but she was still the most famous beauty for miles around. No matter how much James owed me, how I'd literally saved his life, I could never compete with that kind of untouchable fantasy. That kind of allure, impossible to reach, is what people remember as white moonlight. In this life, if James still ends up with Emily, it'll be up to his own ability. I won't interfere anymore. In this timeline, James was revived in the village chief's home. Maybe he was too overwhelmed when he first woke up, but the first thing he did was grab Emily's hand and press it to his cheek. Then he started saying all kinds of strange things that no one could make sense of. Emily slapped him across the face and snapped him back to reality. "What the hell is wrong with you? I save your life, and the first thing you do when you wake up is try to take advantage of me?" she shouted, scolding him nonstop. But in James's eyes, she probably looked like a feisty little wildcat, claws out, puffing with anger, yet somehow adorable. "Emily, I finally found you," James choked, tears streaming down his face. When Emily's mom came inside and saw James crying, she thought he had been beaten up by her daughter. Later, they found out that James was an accountant from the farm, in charge of registrations, and that he had traveled across several villages for work. Emily's expression softened right away. After all, in her eyes, an accountant meant he handled money. "Fine, seeing as you were almost frozen to death, I won't argue with you," she said casually. Thanks, Emily. Emily's mother, though, looked furious. She demanded the village chief send James away immediately. He may just be a guy in his early 20s who woke up confused, but he shouldn't be grabbing at girls. Still, once James got cleaned up, he looked calm, cultured, and undeniably handsome. Anyone would be impressed seeing him like that. The village chief, more knowledgeable than most about the influence of the reinstated exam policy, sat down to chat with James. Listening to his composed tone, his broad outlook, and his familiarity with the farm and even commune leadership, the chief began to see potential. He quietly started considering James as a future son-in-law. When I heard about the village chief's intention to bring James into the family, I wasn't surprised. James's education, manners, and appearance made him one of the most outstanding male-educated youth on the entire farm. Compared to the group of hopeless village boys who followed Emily around like lovesick puppies, James stood out by a mile. Even in his past life, James had exaggerated his connections, claiming he had relationships with officials from the commune all the way up to the county, just to impress people, and it worked. James sweet-talked my dad so thoroughly that he was completely taken in. I figured the things he was saying to the village chief in this life probably weren't all that different from the ones he used in the last. Naturally, I remembered how the chief had quickly developed the idea of bringing him into the family. Emily came to see me several times after that, going on and on about James right in front of me. When I stayed silent, she deliberately changed the subject to something sweet. "We grew up together," she said. "If I get married before you, will you be upset?" I tried to humor her and said, "Your family has good conditions, and you're beautiful. Of course you won't have any trouble getting married. As for me, I just want to stay home and take care of my parents for a few more years." But Emily never missed a chance to jab at me. "The one I'm marrying is the most well-known accountant among all the rural educated youth," she said, laughing smugly. "Your mom's kind of ugly, isn't she? I bet in a few years, once all the young men in the village have picked their wives, only then will someone finally think of you." She giggled again, clearly pleased with herself. Seeing that I had no comeback, she finally turned and left with a smug flip of her hair. Emily and I grew up together. She'd always been the type to show off and flaunt anything new she got. She loved being envied. And if you didn't go along with her, she'd hold a grudge forever, constantly targeting you. After she walked out the gate, I pulled out a study booklet from under the heated brick bed. My younger brother David peeked in from the other room. "She's gone," he said. "Sis, you should change your name and marry an intellectual too." I rolled my eyes. What good is it marrying an intellectual? Wouldn't it be better to become one myself? Right? David replied, a little confused. After all, she's just marrying one of the educated youth. What's the big deal? You'll understand after the new year why she's making such a fuss, I muttered. David didn't quite get it. He stared at the study materials I held, unable to recognize the characters on the cover. His expression turned into that classic meme, like someone trying to read a bill they don't understand. What is this even saying? In this era, most people weren't very educated. That's why the first round of exams after the college entrance test was reinstated was actually much simpler than later years. In my past life, I let my thoughts be limited by my environment. I didn't dare to try for the exam myself. Instead, I threw everything into helping James, turning my entire life into one centered around him. And what did I get for it? James never really appreciated it. He even thought I was the one who got lucky because of him. "My wife's just some poor girl from a mountain village," he once said. "She fusses over small things and doesn't understand the big picture. If I hadn't gotten into college and gone south to start my own business, you kids would probably still be farming up in those hills." People fight for pride. Even a Buddha wants incense. I was going to prove that without James, I could still build a vibrant, successful life. After I signed up for the exam, I went to the county town's state-run photo studio to take my ID photo for the test card. But county towns are small. Before I knew it, I ran into James and Emily again. Emily was standing there in the middle of the street, strikingly pretty and poised. Compared to the thickly dressed crowd and the dull, gray buildings around her, she stood out like a spotlight. In modern terms, she was the most dazzling girl on the street. And in that moment, I understood a little better why James could never let her go. What I saw as just familiar beauty, James had etched into his mind as a once-in-a-lifetime, breathtaking ideal. I was just about to say something. Then my expression turned cold again. Because right behind Emily was James, weighed down with big and small bags, clearly carrying them for her. In my past life, James had worked his official job while preparing for the college exam, running himself like an overworked engine. He was always burning hot at both ends. But in this life, now that he had the chance to win over the beauty, he didn't seem to be in any kind of hurry. "Emily, what are you doing in the county today?" I asked, just as she had already walked up to me through the crowd. She noticed the small envelope in my hand from the photo studio, the kind they used for ID photos. Her eyes curved like crescent moons. "Why are you at a photo studio?" she asked with a sly smile. "It's not a holiday or anything. Taking pictures." "Are you planning to use them for matchmaking?" "Yes," I answered, meeting her gaze directly. "They're for matchmaking." I casually tucked the envelope into my chest pocket. Emily looked me up and down with an exaggerated smirk. "You're really in such a rush to get married that you came all the way to the county? You think your family can even arrange a blind date for you here?" Just then, James came running up, huffing and puffing. Emily's tone changed as she introduced me to him, her words dripping with mockery. "James, this is the childhood friend I told you about, Lisa. She's the one who was driving the mule cart when I got thrown off the back. If it hadn't snowed that day, I could have been seriously hurt." I cut her off. "Emily, if you hadn't landed on your butt that day, would there even be someone chasing after you now?" Emily choked on her own words, completely caught off guard. "So I guess I just got lucky from falling off that cart," Emily said, smiling smugly. "This is James. He just came back. We're getting married by the end of the year." I looked at the pale, gentle-looking city boy in front of me. My chest still tightened with frustration. "Well then, congratulations to you both." I meant to say just that and quickly walk away. But right at that moment, a few other educated youths from the same farm as James passed by and stopped to greet him. One of the male youths looked at me and said, "Hey, you're Lisa, right? You're the only girl from Clearwater Village who signed up for the college entrance exam. Do you have enough study materials? If you ever want to study together, come to the farm and join us." As soon as he said that, James turned to look at me with surprise and a complex expression in his eyes. Emily's eyes went wide. "Lisa, you signed up for the college entrance exam?" The guy didn't catch the tension and continued casually, "Yeah. We saw her at the registration office earlier. We even signed up together." After the confirmation, Emily immediately began to belittle me. "Why would you take the college entrance exam, Lisa? With those stubby legs of yours, you think you can actually pass? God, that's hilarious." Some of the other educated youths frowned. "Why are you talking like that? The papers say anyone who qualifies can take the exam. What's so funny about that? What's wrong with her legs? Aren't you a farmer's daughter too?" Emily had clearly never been publicly called out like that before. Her face turned red, then white, and back again. Finally, she turned all her anger on James. "James, they're all ganging up on me. Why didn't you say a word to defend me?" But James was still frozen in shock, staring straight at me. From the way he reacted, I could tell he had been reborn too. Emily picked up the gift she had left on the ground and hurled it at James before storming off. Only then did James snap out of it. He looked like he had something to say to me, but after hesitating for a second and glancing at the other educated youths nearby, he picked up the gift and rushed after Emily instead. The group of educated youths shook their heads. Some murmured, "Some communes don't let people register for the college exam depending on family background, but I've never heard of a rule saying farmer kids can't take it." James's fiancée is really aggressive. The way he follows her around, he's gonna have a tough time living in the youth dorm with us. For the first time, I felt a twinge of unease. James must have figured out that I had been reborn too, just from knowing I'd signed up for the exam. And who knows what that ungrateful man might try to pull now? As for Emily, she hadn't gotten what she wanted today, so I had a feeling things wouldn't be peaceful, even after I got back to the village. Guess I really should have checked the almanac before heading out today. On the way back, I sat on the mule cart and listened to the creaking wheels roll over the snow-covered, winding mountain road. It took at least 3 to 5 hours on foot to travel the 20-plus miles between Clearwater Village and the county town. Our village was just too poor, too remote. If it had any real hope, would generation after generation of my family have remained stuck in this mountain valley, plowing fields barefoot? If James passed the college exam in this life and left with Emily, they'd have their glorious wedding night under the red lanterns. As for me, I'd likely remarry some guy who seemed promising, wait for him to lift me out of here, and spend my whole life betting on another man's decency. Why should I stake my life on another man? Instead, I'd grit my teeth and get myself out of here, with my own strength. Eventually, my parents found out I had signed up for the exam. They were honest, traditional farmers. They didn't understand much about how the times were changing, and they weren't exactly thrilled about me taking such a big risk. "Lisa," my dad said, "you only really did 1 full year of high school. Why suddenly decide to take the exam? There are so many educated youths out there. What are the chances you'll get in?" I kept my head down, clutching my books, and muttered, "You compare people, someone dies. You compare goods, one gets thrown away. I don't care about anything else. I just need to live differently." I had no syllabus, no review materials, but I still managed to get my hands on a full set of high school textbooks. I stayed on the heated bed night and day, scribbling, circling, reciting, memorizing. I barely paused to eat or sleep. My parents watched me grind myself into the ground and thought I was just acting out because of Emily's wedding. "Should we maybe look into getting her matched with someone?" my mom asked. "Yeah," my dad replied. "I'll go ask your brother tomorrow." I stopped going out altogether, doing everything I could to avoid running into Emily or James. But Emily clearly had no intention of letting things go. Wearing a brand new red cotton coat, she strutted right up to my house again. "See this?" she said. "James bought it for me. It's the best-looking coat in the whole supply co-op. Cost a whole bunch of food coupons, too. Everyone says I look amazing in it." The gate to our yard creaked open. Our house was only enclosed by a wooden fence and some woven brushwood, so our neighbors could see everything. They'd already gathered out front and were murmuring among themselves. I immediately raised my voice. "Emily, you stole my study materials, threatened me not to take the college entrance exam, and then you and your boyfriend attacked me and my brother. Everyone saw it happen. Why don't you let the neighbors judge for themselves? What gives you the right to do all this?" Emily froze, as if waking from a dream. She looked around at all the villagers pointing and whispering about her, and her jaw tightened. Then she snapped back, refusing to admit a single thing. "You're talking nonsense," she said through gritted teeth. "James and I came here to talk about our wedding, and it was you and your brother who started cursing us first. That's why I fought back." She nudged James beside her. "Tell them, James. Isn't that what happened?" James looked completely dazed. He clearly hadn't expected his idealized, pure, and graceful Emily, his so-called white moonlight, to go off the rails like this, flipping the story like some common shrew in the village. At this moment, there was no difference between her and any loud-mouthed, unreasonable villager woman. Emily urged him again. "Say something." "What, are you mute now?" But James's first instinct was to look at me, panting, gripping a wooden stick, furious but upright. He was caught in the middle, unsure what to do. Emily shrieked. "Why do you keep looking at that ugly country girl? Why won't you say a single word for me?" I wasn't about to waste any more time arguing with those two shameless people. I reached over and pulled David close to me. He was trying to act grown up, but his pride had taken a huge hit. He had already started crying. "Come on," I said, choking back tears. "What are you crying for? Let's go find somewhere we can cry properly." Then the two of us stormed into the village chief's house. We plopped down in the courtyard and wailed at the top of our lungs. The neighbors came rushing after us, a whole flock of them, including James. The village chief's wife didn't know how to handle the situation and quickly told her grandson to go fetch the chief. It had been years since Emily had caused such a big scene. The last time was when 2 boys got into a fight over her, and it ended with fists flying right in front of her house. This time, it was even clearer who was at fault. It wasn't long before the village chief arrived, along with my parents. My mom rushed in, taking long strides, and immediately pulled David in front of her. She looked him over, heartbroken. "Look at this. Who hit him?" she shouted. "There are fingernail marks deep enough to bleed. That's going to leave a scar." Then she turned to me and scolded, "Lisa, how could you let this happen to your brother?" Her reaction was pure instinct. Protect the youngest first, blame the eldest for not guarding him better. My mom looked at my pale face and asked, "Lisa, what's wrong now?" I didn't feel like talking. All I wanted to do was fight. The village chief and the swarm of villagers had pretty much pieced together what had happened. He turned to his wife and shouted, "Emily did this? She's real tough, huh? Look what she did to Lisa and her brother." His wife muttered, not ready to back down. "David's just a half-grown boy. How could she have hurt him that bad?" David stood up, wincing from the pain, and climbed up onto a stone stool. "It was Emily who hit me. If she wasn't the village chief's daughter, would she get away with this? She ripped my sister's books apart and beat her up, then dragged her boyfriend into it and had him hit me too. Ah." The village chief looked utterly humiliated. He glanced toward James, who was standing in the crowd with a grim face. Then he pointed straight at him. "Aren't you one of the educated youth? Since when did being with Emily give you permission to go around beating people up?" James's eyes darted away. All he could do was mumble, "It was a misunderstanding." The village chief's wife grew anxious. "Well, where's Emily now?" Just then, the barefoot doctor came by the yard with his two apprentices, one grown and one only about 10 years old. The younger one chimed up. "Emily went to the county town. We saw her on the road earlier, but she didn't even stop to say hi." "Isn't that basically running off to avoid taking responsibility?" I sneered. "If you don't believe me, go to my house. The textbooks she tore up are still lying on the ground. You all know how precious study materials are, especially for someone trying to take the college entrance exam. And just look at my brother's face." The village chief's expression darkened. His eyes were far from kind. My dad immediately stepped in front of me to shield me. The older apprentice, a young man in his 20s, stepped forward. "Don't move," he said gently. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Only then did I realize the throbbing pain shooting from my right wrist. The apprentice examined it briefly, then said quietly, "It's dislocated." James's face changed color instantly. His eyes went dull with guilt and regret. My father, who had stayed silent until now, spoke up with tears in his eyes. "Chief, we're a poor farming family. We've never caused trouble for anyone, so why can't my daughter take the college exam? Why does she have to get her hand broken over it?" The village chief was completely stuck. He had no way to save face. In the end, all he could do was promise, "I don't care what it takes. I'll bring Emily back myself to apologize to your family." The doctor's apprentice reset the bone in my wrist. I was drenched in sweat from the pain, but the only thing I could think to ask afterward was, "Will I still be able to write?" The apprentice was a gentle, well-spoken young man. He smiled faintly and said, "You can try." The moment I tried holding a pen, a sharp, tearing pain shot up my arm. I almost burst into tears. My heart felt like an icicle had just dropped from the eaves and shattered into 1,000 pieces. I wasn't going to marry James in this life. The college entrance exam was my only chance to turn things around, to change my fate. Why should James get to take that from me? Days passed and Emily still didn't show up. David and a few of the village kids found out she'd gotten into trouble and was now hiding out at her second brother's place in the county town. With nothing better to do, she spent her days bossing around her sister-in-law, making her cook and clean like some queen on vacation. That so-called apology was just empty words. In my past life, maybe I hadn't triggered her competitiveness because I was always a few steps behind. No ambition, no James to provoke her. So we stayed out of each other's way. But in this life, with our false friendship already torn apart early on, there really wasn't much to regret. By now, the sky had darkened. I stood under the eaves, frustration piling up in my chest. That's when I saw a shadow step out from beyond the wooden fence. It was James. "You and Emily haven't done enough to me already?" I snapped. "What are you here for now?" James tried to come into the yard. I didn't think it would get this bad, he said. I lowered my voice and narrowed my eyes. What, you're sneaking around in the dark now? If I shout thief, you'll get beaten to death with sticks. You believe me? James froze in place. His face looked pale in the snow. Lisa, I didn't mean for you to get hurt. I just need to know one thing. Did you come back too? I looked at him, saw the anxiety and suspicion in his eyes, and with everything I knew about him from our past life together, I instinctively asked, did you say something to Emily on purpose? Did you hint at something so she'd come and tear up my books? James had no response. So that was it. People said James was an intellectual, a man of culture, but honestly, he was always that timid type who couldn't make decisions, always second-guessing everything. He wanted proof. He didn't dare ask me directly. He knew how hard it was to deal with Emily, so he pushed her toward me instead, hoping I'd lose my cool and reveal something by accident. James. Oh, James. You've got some nerve, using another woman to pick a fight on your behalf. No wonder, I thought. Emily had always been spoiled and impulsive, but she had never gone completely off the rails like this, until now. James, clearly flustered, hurried to explain. Lisa, you really did come back, didn't you? I didn't mean to hurt you. I only said a few good things about you in front of Emily, and she misunderstood. She thought I had feelings for you. I spat to the side. You definitely said more than just a few good things, but it doesn't matter anymore. If you're going to team up with Emily to screw me over, then don't blame me for being rude. Then I picked up a stick, pointed it toward the sky, and shouted, Help! Someone help! There's a thief in my yard! Several big dogs from nearby houses started barking like crazy. One by one, doors creaked open up and down the street. David dashed out. You again? What the hell do you want? James, panicked, shouted. Lisa, you can't treat me like this. Oh, I can't, I snapped. Then how should I treat you? In my last life, I worked myself to the bone for you and your family. I bent over backward just to keep things together. And in the end, you still tried to distance yourself from me on your deathbed, full of regrets that you never ended up with another woman. This time around, I don't even want to know you. And you still try to sabotage my college exam? What you owe me from 2 lifetimes doesn't get wiped clean just because you say, I didn't mean to. David, I yelled. Go hit him for me. David grabbed a wooden pole and chased James, landing a few solid whacks before James managed to escape. You bastard, David shouted after him. Come back again and I'll beat you into the next life. Word spread quickly that James had come to my house to apologize, and ended up getting chased off by David with a stick. I braced myself for Emily's fury, expecting her to storm over any day. But 3 or 4 days passed, and she never showed. The village chief's wife came by with a small basket of mountain goods and dumped them at our door like she was throwing scraps to a beggar. And that was supposed to be their apology. My dad quietly accepted the goods, but my mom looked like she was about to throw them back out. In the past, it was just you and me, she said. I let a lot of things go, but now Emily has come to our house and actually laid hands on our children. James, can't you say something? My dad, trying to stay calm, muttered, What good would it do? You've forgotten what the village chief's sons have done in the commune? He's the chief. The fact he even let his wife bring anything over is more than we could expect. My mom looked over at me, still huddled over my books. She was furious and bitter. Even if you do pass the exam, so what? I had already made up my mind. I was applying to a teaching college where tuition was waived and students received a living stipend. When you leave, are you even coming back? She asked. If I get married, can you promise I'll come back? I shot back. And if you don't come back, she said, what about David and your other brothers? What happens to us? In my past life, after I got married, my entire world revolved around James's work. My parents spent their later years drifting among my brothers' homes. They had a decent enough life. So this wasn't really about her worrying for the family, it was about control, but I had no intention of coming back. I wanted to take my mom, my dad, and all my brothers out of this godforsaken valley, away from this village that made us bow our heads to survive. My mom froze, then turned around, voice trembling as she tried not to cry. In this era, moving out of town wasn't as simple as just packing up and going. You needed permits, approvals, a whole mountain of paperwork. Moving a whole family? It was practically a fantasy. But I said it anyway. Someone in this family has to be the first to walk out. Emily still hadn't come back from the county. James had gone to the chief's house several times to look for her, but she refused to see him. On his last attempt, they slammed the door in his face. All of this can wait until after the exam, they told him. Even the village chief was starting to think James wasn't as decent as he looked. After all, he'd only known Emily for a short time, yet somehow managed to stir up a fight between her and me. Something about that just didn't sit right. After the college entrance exam announcement, many of the educated youth at the farm signed up. The village boys, too, started getting fired up. If even someone like me, considered thick-skinned and not all that bright, was going for it, why not them? James claimed he registered as well, but he hadn't even cracked open a textbook. All he did was chase after Emily. How was that any different from the sleazy guys who used to hover around Emily in the village back in the day? David came back with an update. "Enemy report," he said with a grin. James went back to the youth dorm to study, but that place is like an icebox. He put on his scarf, hat, padded jacket, and still had to stay under the blanket. And guess what? The idiot forgot to bring coal. He tried heating the room with crushed charcoal scraps. Barely worked. Almost froze to death. And when the others went to help, David added, laughing, he poured diesel instead of lamp oil. The whole room filled with black smoke. I nearly laughed myself to death. After I married James in my past life, I took care of everything at home. He was the kind of man who wouldn't even notice if an oil bottle tipped over. A man who hadn't touched housework in decades was suddenly reborn. Did he really think he still remembered how to light oil lamps or burn charcoal? David clutched his stomach, cracking up. And he still has the nerve to ask around about Emily, trying to get someone to send her a message. I couldn't help but clench the cover of my book tighter. In this freezing weather, with barely enough to eat, he still had time to think about romance? Back then, I was so afraid of interfering with James's college prep that I brought him charcoal, cleaned for him, cooked for him. And all the while, he enjoyed my kindness and effort on the surface, while secretly dreaming about Emily, mooching off me emotionally and physically like some pathetic parasite. David didn't understand all the terms I was mumbling. "What'd you say?" I barked. "Nothing useful." With the college entrance exam approaching fast, every time I thought about how I wasted my past life on that ungrateful man, I got even more fired up to study. It gave me a bottomless well of energy. Mornings were for reading literature, afternoons, history. Evenings were the hardest, math. Sometimes my dad would wake up at night and see me hunched over like a witch, muttering formulas in the dim light of the oil lamp. "She's possessed," he said to my mom. My mom didn't say much. The next day, she brought the barefoot doctor's senior apprentice to our home. He brought a case full of gleaming silver acupuncture needles. Sweat beaded on my forehead. "Is it gonna hurt?" He smiled. He really was a good-looking guy. "You can try it and see." So I tried. He stuck a needle into my wrist, and slowly the throbbing pain began to ease. I could finally feel my hand again. I couldn't write fast yet, but I could write. As he packed up to leave, I suddenly asked, "Doctor, what's your name?" He turned, stood straight, his posture clean and confident, nothing like the rough village men. There was something composed and elegant about him. Maybe because I'd been reborn and my mindset was younger too, but my face flushed a little. "My last name's Pan. Pan like the famous poet Pan, he said with a clear, friendly laugh. He glanced at the scattered books on my bed. "No wonder you're taking the exam. You actually read." "What's that supposed to mean?" I snapped, embarrassed. Dr. Pan ended up treating me 3 more times. I kept practicing writing, slowly regaining control of my hand. Eventually, I could write without shaking or slanting. When the test came, I planned to be concise and precise, to write as little as possible, but with accuracy. My determination must have rubbed off on David. He stopped fooling around and started studying seriously, too. Our teacher always said reading would be useful in the future. Even the younger kids stopped messing around. Those who had books read them. Those who didn't drew all over old newspapers with charcoal bits. Outside, the world was frozen solid, but inside, the seeds of learning were quietly sprouting among the children. My parents exchanged a look and stepped outside to talk. 3 days before the exam, word came back from the county. Emily's message had finally made it to the farm. The person delivering it had been badgered by James relentlessly until he finally spilled the truth. "You'd find out eventually anyway," he said. "Emily's in the county town. Her second brother introduced her to a new guy. He has a government job, so if she marries him, she'll become a city resident." James looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "Then what was I to her?" he muttered. "After everything I've done for her?" The messenger looked uncomfortable. "It's not like guys haven't courted her before. Her parents just chased them all off. You and Emily barely even know each other. You haven't filed for marriage or anything. What's there to count?" James couldn't accept it. He insisted on going to the county himself to see it with his own eyes. The other educated youths all tried to talk him down. "You've got the college exam coming. That's your future. Isn't that more important than Emily?" Still, James, heartbroken and dazed, ended up wandering to my house again. This time, it was my dad who caught him at the gate. "What do you want now?" Dad growled. "Why are you back?" James blurted out, "Dad," then froze. My dad's beard practically bristled with rage. James quickly corrected himself. Uncle, I just want to apologize to Lisa in person." My dad gave a dry laugh. "You already apologized once. That's enough. We don't want to hear it again. Get going." But James wouldn't leave. He kept circling the gate like he was dead set on seeing me. A neighbor passed by and asked, "Who's that?" James took advantage of the distraction and shoved his way into our outer room, just as Dr. Pan was finishing an acupuncture session on my wrist. Dr. Pan was still holding my hand. "What are you two doing?" James snapped. He completely ignored the fact that my mom and a few of my younger brothers were in the room too. He looked like some jealous husband catching his wife in the act. David kicked James squarely in the back and yelled, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My dad rushed into the room too. He grabbed James by the back of his collar and dragged him outside. My younger brothers followed, all scrambling to get a hit in. A few neighbors tried to calm things down, whispering, "Isn't that the village chief's future son-in-law? That's enough, let it go." But even my usually mild-mannered dad was furious. "Son-in-law? My ass? Educated youth? My ass? He barges into my house in broad daylight. What the hell was he trying to do? You think we're easy to bully just because we're poor?" I leaned on the windowsill, watching James scramble away like a whipped dog. Dr. Pan glanced at me curiously and asked, "What did that guy even want?" "What else?" I scoffed. "Emily's out of the picture now, so he's crawling back to me, the wife from a past life he betrayed. Disgusting." The day of the college entrance exam finally arrived. Just to be safe, I stayed the night before at a relative's house in the county. James and the other educated youth were arranged to ride in a big truck to the test site. The county high school was swarming with students desperate to change their fate. The moment the exam gates opened, we all surged forward like water pouring into floodgates. The exam lasted 2 days, with a short break at noon. I avoided James as best I could, but after finishing the last subject, I happened to see him across the road while I waited for the bus. His brows were furrowed. A male student was talking to him, but James didn't even respond. As their truck prepared to leave, James suddenly jumped off the back and shouted, "I have to go find Emily." Even at such a pivotal moment in his life, he still couldn't let Emily go. Just then, my bus started up. The conductor shouted for everyone to stand steady and hold on. As the bus pulled away, James turned his head toward the sound and saw me, sitting by the window with my cheek against the glass. Our eyes met. He realized I had seen everything, him jumping off the truck, shouting after another woman right after the exam. The regret and embarrassment on his face were written all over it. What a man. He wanted to chase his white moonlight while keeping his backup plan in his back pocket. I looked away. I didn't bother to spare him another glance. Back in the village, people were already crowding around, eager to ask how I'd done. I told them I filled out every section. The final score would depend on how the graders marked the papers. From what I remembered, this year's exam prep period was short. The math section was okay, but the other subjects didn't really have clear, correct answers. The questions were easy, yes, but too subjective. Who knew what the graders would be looking for? After the exam, I was finally calm. My dad, on the other hand, started freaking out. He smoked all over the house, filling it with clouds like we were living in some mystical fairyland. Then my mom brought Dr. Pan back again. "But my wrist is healed," I protested. My mom waved that off. "Your future isn't. That still needs me to backstop it." Dr. Pan, seeing the situation, just smiled politely. My mom said, "You've seen him. He might come from a poor family, but he's handsome enough to outmatch you." "Gee, thanks, Mom," I muttered. If I'd known in my past life that she was planning to set me up with someone like this, I wouldn't have wasted so much effort chasing after James. Back then, girls really only had two options. Work first, then marry. Or marry first, then work. Not getting married at all wasn't even considered. I wasn't entirely sure I'd pass the exam either. My mom kept talking. "The Pan family lives just a few miles from here. Yeah, they've got a bad political background, but he's a good man. Emily's going to come back eventually. The village chief's going to make trouble for us again. But if you're already married, maybe we'll get left alone." I agreed, but I still asked Dr. Pan. His full name was Pan Yunsheng. "Are you really okay with this?" "I'm not pretty. I'm tall and rough around the edges. I've got a sharp tongue and a bad temper. People say all kinds of things about me." Dr. Pan smiled, that same warm, ridiculously handsome smile. "And I'm good-looking. That makes me a magnet for gossip and jealous eyes. People say a guy like me growing up in a family like mine is like a lotus growing in mud, still only good for feeding pigs. Would you look down on me?" Suddenly my chest tightened. I felt a strange, aching warmth. "No, I think you're great. I like you, because you already are great." Dr. Pan's face flushed bright red. In my last life, starting with nothing but grit, James and I had clawed our way up from a tiny mountain village all the way to a southern city, eventually building a decent life for ourselves. In this life, I had the wisdom and experience of an entire lifetime behind me. And Pan Yunsheng? Compared to James, he was twice as good-looking and carried himself with far more grace. A future with Pan Yunsheng, even if it wasn't full of riches, at least would be pleasant to look at. That alone beat the stifling, bitter life I'd endured with James. Getting married these days wasn't complicated. We submitted a marriage application, picked up a strip of red cloth in the county, and exchanged some ration tickets for candies and pastries. That was already most of the process done. I told Pan, "Once the application goes through after the Lunar New Year, I'll move in with your family. Let's build a good life together." Pan looked at me and asked sincerely, "You really don't care about my political background?" I gave him a secretive smile. "All I know is if I miss this chance, I won't get another." We were laughing and joking when suddenly a commotion stirred on the street. Being taller than most helped, I craned my neck and looked over the crowd to see what was going on. It was Emily. She was wearing a brand new jacket, hair freshly permed. A beggar had wrapped his arms tightly around her thigh, sobbing and refusing to let go. Only when I heard his voice did I realize it was James. He was filthy, absolutely covered in grime. "Emily, you can't leave me." "What am I supposed to do?" he wailed. Emily spat coldly. "Then go die somewhere. I don't care." Then she started shouting for help, and the crowd stepped in. People began pulling James away. He was hit a few times before he finally let go, sobbing loudly for all to hear. It was the kind of crying that could break your heart if you didn't know who he really was. As the crowd began to disperse, I grabbed Pan Yunsheng's hand and pulled him away quickly. Pan looked confused. "Wasn't that the educated youth who injured your wrist? And the woman telling him to die? Was that Emily?" "Exactly," I said. "Reality really is the most absurd drama of all." From James's appearance, I could tell he must have been hiding out in the county ever since the exams ended, still trying to find Emily. To avoid causing trouble myself, I asked Pan to send word to the farm, telling the other educated youths to go retrieve James. I wasn't about to let him freeze to death in the street. I wanted him to live in shame, in total disgrace. Amazingly, our marriage certificate was approved just before Lunar New Year. When the village chief's family found out I had married Pan Yunsheng, a barefoot doctor with a politically bad background and no official work unit, they couldn't stop sneering. Emily had also gotten married. Her husband was from a powerful family, a government cadre with both a job title and guaranteed housing. The chief's wife made sure to mock me to anyone who would listen. Lisa thought she could snag my Emily's match, but she ended up with someone like that. Some villagers spoke up, saying, "But Dr. Pan has excellent medical skills and he's a good person." Others added, "Still, his family were landlords. Even if he's good, their kids are doomed to stay stuck in that poor little village forever." Emily's parents didn't even think twice before marrying her off into a good life, someone muttered. At that, people fell silent. Pan Yinsheng heard the gossip. Of course he felt uneasy. But I wasn't worried. I knew what the future held. "Don't listen to them," I told him. "Policies will change in a few years. When that happens, I'll take the whole family south to live by the sea, where the flowers bloom and the spring never ends." Pan stared at me, chewing over my words. Live by the sea? Endless spring. Lisa, I believe you. Our newlywed days were sweeter than anything I'd ever known in my past life. 3 days after the wedding, we made our first return visit. Emily and her husband arrived the same day, riding in a big truck to visit her family for the second day of the new year. The truck bed was piled high with crates of gifts from the city. They passed out candy and pastries to every villager they passed. The village chief even lit firecrackers to celebrate. Half the village was caught up in the festive spirit. Our side was much quieter. Pan and I brought back just a few small packs of sweets. Our whole family sat around the kang, drinking and eating together. When the firecrackers went off, the younger kids were eager to join in, but David shot them a look and they quickly backed off. Still, some village brats came knocking on our door, teasing, "Why aren't you guys coming out to play? The chief's giving out candy. It's delicious." My dad shooed them away. My mom quietly unwrapped our candy and split it between the boys. Pan sat nearby, his ears flushed bright red the entire time. On the way back, Pan said, "Sorry, I know our side can't compare to the chief's family." Every son-in-law had to say, "I'm sorry," but Pan Yinsheng stayed silent. I reached out both hands and said, "Between the two of us, we've got 4 hands. That's enough to build a home. Get out of this god-forsaken valley." As we made our way down the snowy, wind-swept road out of the village, we actually ran into Emily and her husband. Emily was wearing another fancy new coat, while her husband looked thin and frail. You couldn't call him handsome. The two of them were just about to get into their truck when Emily spotted me. I wasn't wearing anything new, no big truck, no flashy entrance, just my husband Pan Yunsheng beside me, with his strikingly handsome face, real and unembellished. Emily had been holding her chin high until she saw Pan. Her mood instantly darkened. That's how she was, always had to be the one winning. Even if she'd beaten me in everything else, the moment she came up short in one thing, she couldn't take it. Her husband noticed her freezing up and asked, "Someone you know?" Emily deliberately raised her voice. "Don't know her. I don't go around knowing every stray cat and dog." Just then, a strange yell rang out. All of us turned our heads. It was James. His face was scruffy, his hair covered his eyes, and he looked downright disheveled. Emily's face turned pale with fright. She jumped into the truck and urged her husband, "Hurry, drive. Let's go before someone brings bad luck." Her husband gave her a puzzled look, then leaned on the horn. The truck slowly drove past James. To his credit, James didn't do something as stupid as chasing the truck. He just stood on the side of the road, slumped and defeated, like the whole wide world had nowhere left for him to go. He really did look like a stray dog. I pulled Pan Yinsheng along and didn't look back. But Pan glanced over his shoulder a few times. Weren't that guy and Emily supposed to get married? What happened between them? His precious white moonlight went off to the city, and his literary, poetic first love is married now. What else can he do? I said with a sneer. Whatever. No one wants him now anyway. After the new year, the County Education Bureau reportedly posted the preliminary list for college entrance exam results. Pan Yunsheng asked if we should go take a look. But looking out at the heavy snow, I thought about the 20-kilometer hike to the county. Who can walk that far in this weather? I said, even if my name's on the preliminary list, it's not confirmed. We should wait. But then, David came running from my parents' house to our newlywed home. "Sis, you made the preliminary list. They want you in the county right away for a physical exam." He'd heard that a group of educated youths went to check the list and actually saw my name on it. Pan Yinsheng and I were over the moon. A few of the farms had organized transport for the educated youths to go to the hospital for checkups, and we hitched a ride with them. I was so happy, I forgot all about the awkwardness of potentially running into James. The physical went smoothly. Despite my tough country girl build, I was perfectly healthy. The doctor stamped pass on my forms without hesitation. While I was waiting in line at the hospital, I overheard something. A woman in the gynecology department had gotten beaten by her new husband. Word was she'd only been married for about half a month, but turned out to be 2 months pregnant. The husband was furious. "Who is it?" someone asked. "Just someone from the farm." "The woman's from the countryside, doesn't know how to behave," another whispered. Apparently, the doctor had discovered it during the exam, and the woman, acting like a spoiled child, clung to her husband, whining and crying. The man didn't say a word, just hit her until she shut up. People said he was one of the educated youths from the farm. Some of those keywords made my ears perk up. Could it really be? I didn't say anything to Pan Yinsheng on the way home, but the next day, David came running again with a report. "Lisa, Emily's been kicked out by her in-laws. Her face was all swollen from the beating. Her husband smashed up the village chief's place and called her a filthy tramp." Emily's second brother had brought people from the farm to confront James, but James had caught wind of it and ran off. A storm raged in my chest. That coward James had really done it. After being reborn, he'd rushed to cook the rice, to seal the deal with Emily. And Emily, God help her, actually thought she could marry into the city after going that far? Climbing that social ladder had cost her everything. If it hadn't been for the lack of sex education in this era, if Emily hadn't stumbled into that hospital visit, she might have gotten away with it. I snapped out of it and quickly clamped my hand over David's mouth. "Don't tell anyone about this," I warned him. Back home, I told my parents to avoid going out too much. David didn't understand why. I said, "Emily holds grudges. If I don't butter her up, she'll see it as a personal attack. If she finds out I got into college while her life's in ruins, don't you think she'll stir up trouble again?" David scoffed. "She's got the nerve to cause trouble?" She said the only reason she got with James was because he knew the county governor. "Her brain must be fried," I snorted. "Sure, James knows the governor, just because he appeared in a group photo with some county officials after passing the college entrance exam. You know how many people know officials that way?" David waved it off. "Oh, right. James didn't even pass the exam." Only then did I realize I hadn't seen James at the physical exam that day. So this lifetime really closed that door for him, I thought. Ridiculous and pathetic. By early March, when other students had already started college, I still hadn't received my acceptance letter. So I went to the farm near Pan Yinsheng's place to ask around. The other educated youths there were pretty helpful. When they heard I passed the preliminary round through self-study, some looked genuinely surprised, and a little regretful. Out of 17 or 18 who sat for the exam, only 2 passed the preliminary. Not everyone has the insight and courage to seize opportunity when it knocks. If I hadn't been reborn, I wouldn't have had the nerve to even try. In the end, I joined the 2 who had passed and trekked across mountains again to the commune to retrieve our official admission letters. The staff there were very helpful, and when they saw my name, their tone changed completely. "So you're Lisa," one said cheerfully. "You must be well liked. Folks from your village came by a few times to check if your letter had arrived." My heart skipped a beat. I stuffed the admission letter deep inside my clothes and didn't go home. Instead, I secretly sent someone to bring Pan Yinsheng to the farm. It was freezing, but when Pan arrived, he was sweating. A few punks showed up at our place looking for trouble. "I went to your parents." David said Emily already caused a scene there too. I bit my lip hard. What a bunch of bastards. Pan Yinsheng looked at my admission letter and grinned like sunshine after rain. "You finally made it out." I was the first female college student in our village. Everyone crowded into my parents' home to offer congratulations, only to learn I was already married. When they turned up at Pan's, his parents told them I had already left for college. But that didn't dampen their excitement. My success brought pride to both families. Emily had planned to cause another scene, but after her miscarriage, she dragged herself through the snow to my house, ranting and raving. Her health collapsed, and she ended up bedridden on the Kang bed. She had been introduced to her husband by her second brother. But because of everything she stirred up, her brother made countless enemies. The village chief said, "Let her die already." But his wife wouldn't let go. Crying, she called the barefoot doctor. When Emily learned that the doctor's senior apprentice, my husband, was coming, she started spouting nonsense, twisting her own mess into something she claimed I did. Then she laughed maniacally. The barefoot doctor, kind-hearted as ever, said, "It was my apprentice who treated Lisa's dislocated hand. If it hadn't been for your mess, those two never would have crossed paths. You're still young. Why keep fighting the wrong people?" Emily pulled the quilt over her face and bawled. After that, her parents stopped doting on her. She was often beaten and scolded. Rumors about her were cruel. Her mental state took a dive. James, once known in the brigade as a meticulous and upright bookkeeper, never learned to bend with the wind. In our previous life, that rigidity offended more people than he realized. This time around, he flunked the college entrance exam. On top of all the drama with Emily, people whispered that the baby she lost was his. The rumors came in truckloads, but the worst blow to him? That me, actually got accepted into a top provincial university. He was devastated. Like a ghost, he started hovering around my parents' house. David and my younger brothers drove him off with rocks. That bastard. He's the one who messed up my sister's hand. Because of him, we nearly lost our shot at sending someone to college. He and Emily were screwing around. That's why she picked on my sister. "Shameless homewreckers," the kids yelled. The more the village kids shouted, the worse the reputation of the chief's family became. Eventually, one day, James fell on his way back to the farm from our village and broke his leg. By the time someone found him, he was barely alive. The barefoot doctor couldn't do much, so they slowly transported him to the county hospital. As soon as the doctors there saw him, they asked, "Why did you wait so long?" It was too late. He would be permanently disabled. As if that wasn't enough, James was soon found guilty of embezzling grain coupons while working as an accountant. Turns out, he had spent most of them on Emily. From the first time I James buy her all those things, I knew he must have been diverting public funds. It was obvious. Back then, educated youths only received a small living allowance, and bookkeeping at the commune was basically unpaid labor. There was no way James had spare ration coupons for everything he gave her. In the end, because he was now disabled, they didn't send him to prison. But his future, whether taking the exam again or returning to the city, was gone. James had to pay for what he'd done. He was destined to spend the rest of his life stuck in that mountain village, right where he belonged. It made my anonymous report to the authorities worth it. 3 years later, Panyan Sheng passed the entrance exam for the Provincial Medical University. We reunited in the capital city. That summer, we returned to my hometown together. I only went back because something major had happened to the village chief's family. My mom had been waiting at the edge of the village for us. 3 years, and I finally get to see you again, she said. As we passed by the chief's old home, I noticed the house had collapsed. My mom looked grim and urged us to keep walking. Once we were home, sitting comfortably on the warm Kang bed, my dad finally explained. After you left for college, the city began investigating old cases. All of the village chief's sons got exposed. The second son was the worst. He had seized someone's house in the county and even forced a girl to marry him. It all came to light. When the chief heard about it, he had a stroke. Emily had already lost her mind by then. One night, she burned down the house. The chief and his wife were rescued, but they died just a few months later in the broken-down shack they were staying in. David added dryly, "What's there to pity? The chief bullied us enough. I haven't forgotten." My second brother chimed in, "They caused the whole village shame even in death. A few years ago, when Uncle Lou went to the county, people heard where he was from and said, 'Oh, that village, the one with a college student and a scandal.' Uncle Lou nearly got into a fight over it." I stayed quiet. Honestly, this wasn't far from how it went in my past life too. Emily did marry well, but her brother's problems eventually dragged her down. Her husband wanted a divorce after everything that happened. Emily was spoiled and couldn't take it. She drank pesticide and died in her 20s. Back then, I felt sorry for her. She had such a tragic early death. Despite everything, I could only remember her as the bright, willful girl from our childhood. When I was reborn, I really did want to help her change. Her failed marriage had led to her and James crossing paths in the first place. If their fate was like the king dreams of her, but the goddess has no heart, then I couldn't interfere. But if their feelings were mutual, then James got what he wanted, and maybe Emily would have a better ending than dying after a fight. We were meant to walk separate roads, and that should have been it. Who could have predicted that in this lifetime they'd implode so spectacularly? James was conniving and shallow, Emily was selfish and reckless. Together they created their own disaster, and even I had to admire just how thoroughly they ruined themselves. After dinner, my husband and I took a walk through the village. David, now taller than me, led us mysteriously to a dilapidated shack. "Sis, this is where James and Emily live now." "Seriously? They got back together?" Just then, the door creaked open. We ducked out of sight. James hobbled out with a crutch, looking filthy and unkempt. The house was so run down, it didn't even have a proper wall. He leaned his crutch aside and struggled to start a fire using a battered beehive box. Suddenly, a wild-haired woman burst out of the house laughing. Only when I looked closer did I realize she had a thick rope tied around her waist. It had snapped. James froze, then shouted and limped after her. But how could a disabled man on crutches possibly catch up with a manic woman running full speed? I couldn't believe it. That woman was Emily. David nodded. "Yeah. After the village chief and his wife died, her relatives took care of her for a bit, but her mental illness kept getting worse. Then all her brothers went to prison. No one looked after her anymore. After that, I don't know what James said to Emily's remaining relatives, but somehow he managed to take her back and settle into that crumbling house with her. It was as if James had finally fulfilled the wish he'd carried through 2 lifetimes. On this return trip, my in-laws had also finally shed the stigma of being labeled as landlords. My mother-in-law, relieved as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, took out a family heirloom jade bracelet and placed it on my wrist. I hesitated to wear it, but she said, "Ever since you went to college, a lot of people said you'd never come back. Some even thought you'd break things off with Yunsheng. But you didn't. You even wrote him letters to encourage him to apply to college too. For our family to have you as a daughter-in-law, it's like heaven finally opened its eyes to us." I gently touched the bracelet that had somehow been preserved through all these difficult years, and said to her sincerely, "Mom, the good days are still ahead for us." That really warmed her heart. Once the break was over, Pan Yunsheng and I got back on the bus to return to the capital. As the vehicle began to leave the village and climbed up a steep hill, Yunsheng tugged at my sleeve and motioned for me to look outside. There was a man, leaning on a crutch, standing silently and watching in the direction we were leaving. I saw him. It was James. He seemed to be shouting something at the top of his lungs, but I couldn't quite make it out. Not that it mattered, we wouldn't be coming back. Our goal was to settle down in the city as soon as possible, and once we did, we'd bring both his family and mine out of that village. Then together we'd move toward the life we dreamed of, facing the sea, with spring flowers in bloom. "Lisa," Yunsheng said, "I believe in you."